Welcome to the reconvening of the budget hearings. My name is Erica Strasburger, and today I'm joined by Councilwoman Darlene Harris and Councilman R. Daniel Lavelle. And we are going to be hearing from the Department of Innovation and Performance. As chair of the Department, or as chair of the Innovation, Performance, and Asset Management Committee, I'm happy to be overseeing and chairing this meeting. So today we have a few guests at the table, but before that, I'll turn it over to Council Budget Director Bill Urbanek to provide an overview of the department before we turn it over to our guests.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Bill Urbanek, City Council Budget Director, and happy Monday, everybody. The Department of Innovation and Performance, their mission is to elevate the work of the city government. INP has 6 priority focus areas in 2020 to accomplish this mission. Implement a technology refresh program, invest in the INP team, invest in the city's technical infrastructure, establish a software applications roadmap and strategy, follow best practices in IT service management, invest in cybersecurity. Department of Innovation and Performance is divided into following general service areas: IT operations, technology, security and risk, project management office, administration, communications, which includes the 311 response line, and innovation. The budget highlights for in the 2020 proposal: the total budget for Department of Innovation Performance would be $17,687,000. That's an increase of $2,592,000, or 17.2%. Total full-time positions are 78 in the proposed budget. That's an increase of 6 from 2019. Of the 72 full-time positions in last year's budget, 37 of them have changed: new titles, new rates and grades, and new responsibilities. In addition to the massive overhaul of existing employees, the GIS division and the 4 GIS employees were transferred from city planning to INP. Like the positions of the department's 20 non-salary subclasses, 18 of them have changed in some way. Highlights include machinery and equipment decreased by $1.6 million due to completion of a one-time purchases from last year. Telephones increased by $1.2 million due to the Fcc ruling regarding WAN connectivity. Computer maintenance increased by $1.2 million. In addition to normal yearly increases to expenses, this line also increased $500,000 with the transfer of the GIS division expenses from city planning, and also a $185,000 transfer of cartograph from the Department of Public Works. Printing and binding increased $225,000 due an increase to the AMCOM printer contract. Innovation and Performance also has some revenue line items. The big revenue line item is the Cable Bureau revenue. $5 million through every year of the 5-year plan. That's a 5% decrease. And to remind the public and our members as well too, there will be negotiations this year on a new franchise agreement. Innovation and Performance also has some has a capital project, a big one, and that's the Information Systems Modernization line item, $1.5 million in each year of 2020 and 2021 in the 5-year plan. Department of Innovation and Performance has 2 trust funds related to cable. The Comcast Trust Fund current balance is $100,000, and the Verizon Trust Fund with a current balance of $220,000. And with that,
thank you, Director Urbanek. I am now happy to turn it over to the Department of Innovation and Performance leadership to provide an overview of their 2020 budget. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and we'll look forward to seeing your presentation.
I am Santiago Garces. I am the Director of Innovation and Performance.
My name is Heidi Norman. I'm the Deputy Director of Innovation and Performance.
So we'll share with you the plans for 2020, and I said that we are proposing that we spend the money that we're requesting from you. So we'll be covering where we are, the current state, what are the things that we need to improve for the department and the city to be successful? How is it that we're going to get to these improvements, including some other objectives that are important as well? We'll share with you an analysis around what exactly is changing in our budget, what are the areas where there's increases, where things are staying the same, and when we're reducing expenditures. And then an analysis of how is it that other departments use IMP resources. Again, we are stewards of resources for the city, but we're a broker when it comes to technology services. The licenses, the software that we buy, for the most part, is used by other departments. And then we'll do a deep dive into each of the 6 items that, as Director Urbanek was sharing, constitute the 6-point plan for 2020 and to improve the conditions of the department. In the past few years, we've seen a 3-fold increase in the number of devices in our network. Again, this includes tablets, smartphones, devices that people are bringing in on their own laptops, their own smartphones that they're bringing onto our network. At the same time, the average age for computers in the city is 6 years, and some of the computers are over 12 years old. It is industry best practice from a security standpoint and from a total cost of ownership to limit the age of the devices to about 4 years. Overall, we spend about $4,000 per employee per year. When we compared this to a benchmark of other local governments about our size, between $500 million in revenue and $1 billion in revenue, our peers are spending about $8,000 per employee per year. They're spending about half of the money in technology compared to our peers. What we need to improve in order for the department to fulfill its mission to ensure that we have a strong, reliable, and fiscally responsible environment, we need to support over 100 locations that are distributed across the entire city. We support about 2,000 PCs and then several hundred smart devices. And we have over 20 major software applications. These are critical pieces of software that help the city run its operations, including the records management system in the police department that tracks all criminal activity, the revenue management system for finance, the ERP that manages all finance and procurement. So basically, we are an integral part of almost every department's operations. Again, even though the focus of our projects, for the most part, focus on the technology side, it is also important to remember that we are also responsible for the operation of the Pittsburgh City Channel. We are the main entity in charge of the cable franchise agreement, the print shop, the website, all the telephones, 311, the performance improvement program, innovation programs such as PGH Lab and inclusive innovation. Let's dig deeper. We'll dig a little bit deeper in a little bit about the 6 core areas of investment. Just some others to highlight. Again, cybersecurity. We'll share to you how is it that we're planning on reducing the exposure to financial risk and exposure to operational risk. Just the reminder that in Baltimore recently, the city had to spend over $18 million recovering from a ransomware attack, and it severely hampered their operations for months. Data services, again, investing in GIS, investing in data infrastructure, investing in governance, investing in the tools that allow us to do a better job of managing privacy and analytics within the city. We have something that's really important. I know it's very important to Bill. The franchise agreement renegotiation. This is the agreement that enables Comcast and Verizon and any other group that might want to provide cable services within the city, and it governs the terms of that permit to operate. Performance management, all of the work that we're doing to try to keep the city focused, to make sure that we're being transparent, that we're being efficient with the resources that we're giving. So this is might seem a little bit of a tricky graph, but let me walk through this. So this is what is changing between 2019 and 2020. So we start with our previous budget, which is about $15 million. The second chart, the second bar, which is labeled as increase, is all of the things that have increased in costs, but that we're already paying for. So these are all the things that, due to inflation or due to our contracts, we're already scheduled to be more expensive this year without us doing anything really. The next bar that says new is all of the new expenditures that did not exist in 2019. This includes the investment in the network piece that is highlighted in the budget brief, the $2 million. It's all of the things that we're requesting you to fund. The savings bar are all of the things that we were spending in 2019 that we're no longer going to spend in 2020 because we've decided to move those funds precisely to fund, for the most part, new things. So overall, the main message is we are working really hard to be fiscally responsible, to make sure that all of the new things are, for the most part, offset by stopping to do things that we were doing in the past. And then there's a small graph that shows the transfer of money. And on the right, you have a table that just shows per program what is the net increase between last year and this year. Again, as we were talking about earlier, IMP is really just a broker of services. So we're a pass-through for the firefighters that have their email address and the public works employees that have their computers. We pay for those computers and those email licenses for that software. Not all of it, but most of it. And just to show, IMP only accounts for about 10% of the resources that we're requesting. 90% of the resources get spent by other departments, including council, including the mayor's office. So when you're investing in us, you're really investing in the operations of all the city. We did some accounting methodology to create these allocations, again, looking at what were the total costs of the licenses, the network, and so on and so forth. This reflects the same pattern. These are the number of tickets that we receive from other departments, including ourselves. This is just generally reflects the work effort that we spend on the other departments in a given year. So we'll dig deep into the 6 core areas that we're requesting your support for. And again, they include the technology refresh, the IT service management component, infrastructure investments, software roadmap, cybersecurity, and investing in our team. So starting with investing in our team, we're in the process of reorganizing the department, and we've been able to reorganize the department in 2019 being budget neutral, and today we're requesting you for funding for 6 new positions that for the most part are going to cover, let me just explain a little bit the new structure. So we are proposing creating a new division of cybersecurity. This is typical for an organization our size, and having a dedicated person that's responsible for cybersecurity full-time, an assistant director that will also be our chief information security officer. We've restructured to have an infrastructure division that is responsible for the network and for the servers, for the hosting of the applications, and a service desk that is moving away from a help desk, instead having a case management mentality of making sure that we're tracking the service levels of all of the services that we're providing, and ensuring that when someone submits a ticket, that the ticket goes all the way to completion. We'll talk a little bit more about service management, but the service desk plays a key role there. We are also creating a dedicated team for devices, again, making sure that every employee has the right device, that it is working well, that that we're optimizing the resources that we have in the cost of those devices and making sure that is working appropriately. And we'll talk a little bit more about the technology refresh there. On the application side of things, again, having a dedicated team for applications, we're spending millions of dollars on these applications, so making sure that we have a team that's tracking the contracts, that is constantly looking at better architectures and better arrangements with our vendors. So we'll have an applications team, including the GIS team, a data services team, and enterprise applications. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. Communications, really important, the cable channel, 311, social media, the print shop, which are critical to the function of the city. The innovation team, which brings all of the performance improvement team, the data analytics team, and then the people that are responsible for some of these really successful efforts in connecting with local universities and with local companies. And finally, but not least, the administration team. We are also, as part of the reorg, making sure that there's a dedicated person within the administration team to handle the compliance for the franchise agreement, which was something that wasn't there in the past. So there'll be a person whose job role will explicitly mention that responsibility. So the positions, again, overall, requesting for senior leadership for some of these new technology divisions, the Chief Information Security Officer, Senior Manager of Applications, a Senior Enterprise Applications Administrator, especially helping support the work of public safety, which has a number of applications and a number of technology components. And then the last two, as the grants that had supported the civic innovation activities at the city are running out, making sure that we continue that important work by bringing those positions in the budget. Investing in our team, we've been focused on a number of training initiatives. The performance improvement team has developed the Gold Belt workshop. Up to date, they've saved over $200,000 in, again, time and cash and helping solve processes for our residents and for our employees. We're focusing on project management training, making sure that we're completing projects not only in our department but in other departments on time, on budget, giving visibility to all of the things that we're doing and doing a better job of managing that. And then ITIL, which is the IT service management, which I'll talk a lot about in a minute. It's a technology refresh, and we've discussed this with council, so I'll just talk briefly. But basically, we want to make sure that computers are never too old, so we'll be refreshing our computers every 4 years, and we'll be doing this by refreshing about 1/4 of our computers every year. And we've developed a methodology to make sure that we have the right computers, so doing an assessment of what are the needs of how people are doing their work, identifying the technology, and then deploying and ensuring the proper operation of the devices. This is an overview of what the tech refresh program, and again, this is the same lens that we're using to look at the printers and all of the different systems. So these are all the expenditures about tech refresh. Infrastructure. Everything in the city that has technology touches the network, whether it is in the cloud or on-premise. Anytime that a device connects within a city facility and goes to the internet or talks to each other, it goes through our network. And we are in need of investing in really strong infrastructure there. So we've made a request for capital budget. Given what we've received, we'll be able to invest next year, especially building the core components of the network and investing in some of the larger network facilities. I'll probably do about 3 or 4 large facilities. And then the second year, we'll be able to handle some other facilities, bringing us to about half of the 115 facilities that we have here and bringing Wi-Fi to all these facilities and getting them ready to use voice over IP and some other technologies that are commonplace in most organizations now. There's the need for this next generation network, and this covers this item around the FCC ruling. So our franchise agreement is governed by the Federal Communications Commission, and the FCC has ruled that the cable providers are no longer obligated to provide, or they can choose to charge us for the iNets, which are the internet connectivity that we've been getting to most of our facilities for free. So, and the FCC has said they're entitled to do that. So in anticipation for that regulatory change, since we're no longer going to get this benefit for free, we've decided to budget that amount up front, thinking that we can get a better deal than just go with the status quo, which is going with the communications providers. So we budgeted $1.5 million for next year. It might be about $2 million overall every year. But what we think we can do is create a network that's far more resilient, far more, a network that's not failing regularly, a network that is able to support growth as we start adding body cameras, as we start adding public safety cameras, rec to tech, all of these things that increasingly require bandwidth. We want to make sure that the network's never the linchpin that is preventing progress at the city. And again, as you can see, the map of all the facilities that are located throughout the entire geography of the city. It's an overview of the investments in infrastructure. And again, another one that is of interest here is we're investing in network monitoring. So these are the tools that allow us to proactively monitor how the network is doing, which from a security standpoint is great, but also from a user experience standpoint, because we'll be able to detect if a network is starting to fail before it actually fails, and be able to address the issues before. Right now, we have to wait until a user reports that the network's not working. Another thing to highlight is this cloud and collocated infrastructure making a shift from being heavily in-premise, like hosting in our data center here, instead pushing that to other vendors to be able to have more reliable and more secure and faster service. IT service management, again, this is perhaps the biggest key recommendation from the Deloitte report that was prepared in 2016. In 2019, we trained 100% of this staff, and we got them certified in ITIL foundations. This was a $45,000 investment this past year. And we also invited people from other departments. This is fundamental IT service management and service management methodology. And then we're also requesting some funds to be able to implement a tool that allows us to do a better job of, again, asset management, tracking all of the software that we have, all the computers that we have, all the servers that we have. From a security standpoint, that's essential, but also being able to tag the incidents whenever something's wrong to those assets, and being able to see how well they're operating and whether they're meeting our users' needs. There'll be an employee portal and a knowledge base. And all of this is enabled by the reorganization, by the creation of the service desk and of the specialized functional teams. Software roadmap, I won't read it point by point, but we are very rapidly, the city as a whole, replacing and modernizing a lot of the core systems that the city uses to conduct its business, all permitting and licensing, all of HR, there's plans to modernize the police records management system. Again, this is the investment of going into the records management system that the county has, allowing us to discontinue in the next couple of years the use of the system that B3 had built for us. So this is investing in the records management system is part of the plan of being able to leave the existing agreement with B3. There's the snowplow route optimization, which is a major project. We're critically involved in the revenue management plan. Again, another one of the main components of the B3 contract is the revenue management system that tracks all of the revenue that comes to the city through the Department of Finance. That's getting implemented, and the intended go live is 2021. So we're involved in probably the largest, fastest modernization effort that the city has seen when it comes to software. And that's why we also need that software applications team. There's some big planned projects, GIS. I know that Councilwoman Gross is, yeah. So we're asking for the funds to be able to ensure an enterprise license agreement to make sure that the people in the city have the right license to be able to run the software. And we're going to invest $300,000 improving the quality of the data so that we can do the analysis, do a better job of interfacing with the county to get information around who owns what property and track all the parcels and the central line and all these. Document management, we're investing $150,000. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's the initial investment in creating an enterprise document management system that encompasses the needs of the city. We know that the clerk and the archivist are, as part of their strategic plan, have laid out the idea of digitizing all city records. This doesn't get us there, but it builds the foundations to be able to grow and move in that direction. We're modernizing the website. We need to ensure that we have a modern website that is secure, that it's easy to maintain. This investment in the CMS will allow us to do that. And again, the fire department is budgeting for this with some upgrades to the firehouse system, which is the system that they use for records management and personnel management. Cybersecurity, we're in the process of implementing a risk-based model for cybersecurity following the NIST cybersecurity framework. Long story short, this is the same cybersecurity framework that all federal agencies are mandated to use, and about 50% of all the Fortune 500 companies use. This is the best in class. We're partnering. Part of the idea of having a dedicated cybersecurity team is to have people that are managing that program. We've been partnering with Homeland Security and with the Multi-State Information Security Exchange to get assessments and vulnerability detections for free. And we're requesting some money for cybersecurity monitoring. Again, this is the tools that allow us to know when things are going wrong before they go fully wrong. Some recurring expenses for endpoint monitoring, and we're also requesting some funds to remediate any issues that might come from the assessments. Also a lot, so I'll stop and see if you have questions.
Thank you, Director. I really appreciate that very detailed presentation and walkthrough of all the different requests, because I know that there are some significant requests for the 2020 budget. I'd like the record to reflect that we've been joined by Councilwoman Deb Gross. And before I offer comments and some questions that I have, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues to see if they have any questions. Do we want to start at the end of the table and work our way down this way, Councilwoman?
Appreciate it, thank you. Sorry, I was late. I was touring an affordable housing development before I got here. So I'm glad to see that we're getting around to some things that have been long overdue, right? So I appreciate the deep work in just even planning for it. Planning for cybersecurity, planning for, I think, what council members have been concerned about, which is doing that continuous assessing of what are the department's software needs, right? And all these cloud-based softwares that we've been talking about, we've seen and voted on, I have seen and voted on in 6 years, a lot of software packages. And have questioned whether we know whether or not we're getting our money's worth, right? You've heard me say this before when you've been at the table for various packages. So it's been department by department by department, and it has looked a little helter-skelter. And so it's, I think, reassuring to me that you are going to be resourcing and staffing that monitoring and assessing in a kind of like constant check-in way. I think that is exactly what's needed. Are we paying for too many bells and whistles in law department? Are we paying for too many bells and whistles in planning? I mean, where are the needs, and are they matched to what packages we've contracted for? There's some new topics that I'm interested in. I know a lot of members kind of lived through cable franchise agreements before, and I have not, and don't know as much about it as other members. But you mentioned that it has changed specifically around, I didn't catch the acronym, but I assume it's that there was a mandate from the FCC for free government internet connections, and that's gone. You called it a X something. So that just opens an opportunity, I think I caught you saying, in that we have options now, right? Since we're not getting it for free, we're not committed to doing that. And for 150 facilities, which range from recreation centers to firehouses to warehouses, right? I mean, where the snowplows are parked. And so the DPW facilities all around the city. How are we going to get them connected is the question, the opportunity, and the question right here. So I'm interested in that because one of the things that I have some constituents who have raised some good questions to me that I didn't have good answers for, I don't think we have good answers as a city, is do we have an opportunity for municipal broadband in Pittsburgh? That's a very big, crazy question, right? Out of the box question. Director Urbanek's already shaking his head. Forget about it. Not a thing you can do. However, save that. I'm glad I have the floor and you don't, because we do have the opportunity that some cities have taken advantage of, which we do have the right to have conduit under our streets, and you can lease that out, right? And so it's a matter of the city, the municipality, owning some of the literally physical infrastructure. Right, and so it's just like you would rent out space to anything else, right? So if you have, it's literally empty PVC pipe is my understanding, right, that you would have under sidewalks. So if we're thinking out of the box about how we're going to connect to point A to point B for 150 points, are there places where there is already conduit? I didn't think there was any, but then I was told by the Duquesne University that there is some conduit near their campus. Do you know where all that conduit may be?
Yeah, no, that's
So you have a map?
That's a great point. We do. Right now, most of the conduit that is owned by the city is the conduit that is used for the traffic signal. So if you think about everywhere, there's a traffic
Under
signal.
bomb for sure track?
Yeah, and everywhere also for the legacy traffic lights. So yeah, precisely as you're saying, we want to be ahead and be proactive and plan. And now with the resources that we're requesting, we have the possibility of thinking creatively and working with the council to think about the best way of getting this done.
I think I'm going to have to ask that again. So you said every single place there is a traffic light in the city of Pittsburgh, we have conduit running to it from somewhere else.
Yes.
Got it. And so in your upgrading of the GIS capacity, are we going to be layering these kinds of layers? Because they're not currently layered.
There's some
We have the data
information,
set,
yeah.
but we're not really using it graphically, right? Yeah. So I really am glad I came in on this part of the discussion to hear at least those parts. I'm sorry I missed the other parts of your discussion because I'm very interested in both of those topics, so I would love to hear more about those. And they don't seem like exorbitant price points at all. GIS was like $200,000 or something like that. So to add the capacity where we could actually really be analyzing to make smarter decisions is a very worthy investment. And so I would love to hear more about that because it doesn't have to be every place in order to have the option to say, like, you know what, this is our backbone. And so we're going to have backbone to these types of places. Can you indulge me like one more minute on that topic? How does that overlay with the mayor's smart spines thingy? Because I don't know what else to call it. I mean, it's a plan, a concept. Is it actually happening? It's kind of happening some places. So what, like,
I'm glad that's a great question. And that's exactly how we're looking at this. How is it that we overlay the Smart Spines project, the Smart Streets Lights project, the need for the connectivity for all of our facilities? So the stage at which we're at now is precisely planning on figuring out how is it that we leverage the different projects to try to build them together, because the Smart Spines project contemplates investment in technology infrastructure around most of the main corridors in the city that encompass all council districts all around the city. So it provides a great opportunity to think about if you wanted to invest in the conduit and invest in the network. So definitely that's one of the ways that we're looking at, and also thinking about it from an equity standpoint too. So thinking about how is it that we bring connectivity, or what facilities or what services can we bring to
Because
areas.
we can generate one place, we can fill a need where there's just an existent gap in other places. So we definitely have high demand data. You could do a density map of data demand. I'm sure the big cable companies have that. Do we have access to that?
We have some access to, especially on the, there's some open data sets that the cable providers share. And again, this is also, we're also coordinating with the rollout of 5G and the small cells. So we have some maps around the places where we know that there's gaps in coverage. And so we're trying to do the math, and precisely as you're saying, using GIS to make all these things add together. Having a better GIS environment would help tremendously in doing that more easily. But
And so, for example, it's almost premature to jump to bidding out these contracts without first knowing whether we could be the owner in some sectors. In some geographic footprints. Not, again, it doesn't have to work everywhere for it to be an opportunity.
Yeah, we're working closely with DOMI and with the other departments in coordinating the projects, and we're working all together and figuring out what is the best way of bringing all of the pieces together to make it the most cost efficient and kind of achieving the equity mission and all of the things together. So definitely we're keeping an eye on the ball and making sure that all the moving pieces go to the same.
I won't take any more of my time here, but I'd love to hear more about that at any other time. And I'm sure my fellow colleagues will mention the fact that we're very eager to see hardware and software upgrades on the council side of the city. Sorry. We feel neglected. Maybe everyone is also equally neglected, but we definitely have had our share of pain and misery on getting our any kind of software to function. So I appreciate there have been improvements already. I mean, I will joke that there have been other budget years where I was like, when I've been asking for computer upgrades for 5 years, I kept getting the same computer. Like, I sent them away one time, I think, when you had just arrived. One of your employees, with all due respect, came down, because that's all there was. I was like, that is the same old computer in a box. I could go to Best Buy myself and buy a better computer for cheaper. So I sent it away, and you've got me a computer that doesn't crash when I tried to even do simple analyses in Excel. Because every other computer I had until last year crashed when I would just try to use Excel at all, which, I've been doing for 30 years. So thank you for at least I have a functional computer. I'll see my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I want to let the record show that we've been joined by Councilwoman Kale Smith.
Let the fun begin.
We're working our way down the table. Councilman, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. I'll echo the sentiment of the council upgrades, but I'll also say thank you for the upgrades that have already been made. They are very, very much appreciated. Second, part of my ignorance, because I'm far from the most informed person as it relates to this conversation, why can't we have citywide broadband?
So this would probably be best answered by Yvonne and law, but there are some state laws that preclude municipalities from being able to operate broadband internet service providers. So, but again, there's a number of opportunities where we can, thinking about our recreation centers and thinking about some of the other assets that we have that we can use to alleviate the digital divide and some of the issues that exist, but it is the state law that prevents us from being able to operate it, and the financial burden of setting up a...
Thank you. I did not know that. But in answering the question, you actually got to where I wanted to go anyway, which is the digital divide. And my question was really, in doing the upgrades across the city to our facilities, how do we potentially then allow for particularly low-income residents? Because what I've quickly discovered are there's, especially within our students who are in schools, there is still a divide with the children that do not have internet access at home or do not have sort of capable speeds at home so that their software isn't crashing when they're trying to do basic work. How do we potentially, I'm not sure how to even ask the question appropriately, but how do we potentially leverage our upgrading our system on all the 125 spaces you identified to potentially have residents use our system to close that divide?
Yeah, no, that's another great question, and that's exactly the intent
Right.
of the Rec to Tech initiative. So the idea would be that we would be providing very high speed, very high quality access to devices too. If the students don't have devices, or for that matter, any resident that doesn't have a device, if they're going to a recreation center, that they can borrow a device. And a place that is safe too. We've done in the past some analysis with universities around what are some of these gaps, and part of the challenge is you end up having students that have to do homework in McDonald's or in places where they're not safe. So inviting the students to the recreation centers in some of these spaces that we're designing. And the other piece is, as part of the technology refresh program, we're also thinking after 4 years, these devices, we definitely don't want to keep them on the network and we don't want to maintain them, but we're thinking about, could these devices have a second life with some of these families? They're still good devices, and could we figure out a way to give them to them? So we're thinking around our initiatives, how is it that we help support those needs?
Sorry, thank you. We're also having a sidebar that there are literally some children who can't do their homework because the homework is now
Only digital.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, my children are still young enough, they're in first and third grade, they still get some paper homework, but my daughter was also sent home with a computer this year. And so there's now stuff that's being put on that's only homework that's only digitalized. And so you have kids who are failing simply because they don't have access to internet. So to the extent that we can, one, give the old computers, as you mentioned, I'd fully support that, and or the Rec to Tech, which I'm fully supportive of, and I thank the mayor for that initiative. Just for council's clarity, we're looking to do Rec to Tech at Jefferson Rec Center, which is the only rec center on the north side, and we're also going to be looking to do it at Ammons Rec Center in the Hill District as well. So I'm fully supportive. Quick question, and maybe that you already answered this. Because the municipality can't own the broadband, does that also mean we can't then also sort of have like a purchase agreement for businesses to access it?
Yeah, so we can build the network that supports our own needs as an enterprise, including the recreation centers and that stuff. We would not be able to resell our connectivity to business or in retail to individuals. However, we are planning on working together with the authorities and with the schools, because the same needs and the same challenges that we all have. BWSA needs to connect a lot of facilities, the Port Authority needs to connect a number of facilities. So I think that as we work together as a community, we'd probably get to a better solution than if we work independently. So we've started having some of those conversations with those folks.
Can we give it away?
That's for Yvonne. That's a question for Yvonne, not for me. But there's the possibility of doing free Wi-Fi in the right-of-way again if we're not giving it specifically to people. That's some of the investments in the network are precisely to be able to accommodate all of that need and that growth. So we'll be investing in the infrastructure that would allow us to provide free Wi-Fi in the public space and the community centers in some of these places. So definitely.
What is our current broadband speed? What will we be upgrading to?
It varies by location, but the draft is to have a 10 gigabyte backbone between the core facilities. We currently don't have a 10 gigabyte backbone, I don't think anywhere in the city, but within our facilities, and then a 1 gigabyte backbone to kind of the peripheral sites. Some of the facilities that we have are way below that.
Thank you. Two other questions. You mentioned snowplow optimization. What is that?
That is the project that we are embarking on in partnership with Public Works to install the snowplow tracking systems. But as part of that project, we're also getting and cleaning the data to be able to do route optimization to try to make sure that the snowplows are running the most efficient routes to save time and money and make sure that they're really cleaning the streets in the most optimal way. There's a fair amount of math and a fair amount of kind of data-intensive pieces to this that we're working, again, very closely with Public Works and with the vendor to complete. The new version of the system should be live this snow season, but we're going to be making some improvements to the route optimization and all of that throughout the next year.
Oh, our print shop. So if I do a massive mailing, I still go outside the city to do it because we don't have the capacity in-house to do it. Is there any sort of plan to upgrade our print shop to the point where we can do mass mailings in-house?
Yeah, so we've made some investments to the print shop in the past couple of years, and we just moved the print shop to a new location in the 4th floor. But we'd love to meet with you and understand better your needs. Again, part of the whole service management methodology that we're trying to implement is have a better understanding of what the customer's needs are and see how is it that we can fill them. So we'd love to have a conversation about that.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councilman. I understand that Councilwoman Cale Smith would like to go next, and then followed by Councilwoman Harris.
Thank you. I think a lot of great questions were asked, and I know Ms. Harris has a lot of great questions. I just want to talk a little bit about the microphones, first of all. Are there any plans for the microphones? Did I miss any conversation with them?
There isn't anything specifically budgeted, but we are always happy to discuss with the council about it.
So I think I think we all have concerns because it's really difficult to hear. We hear a lot of complaints about how difficult these microphones are to hear. You almost have to, stay on top of them. And so it's difficult for the residents to hear. And so I want to make sure that we address that. Also with Pittsburgh Public Schools, when they have the speakers, they can turn the mics off and on. I mean, their system is really great. So I really wish you'd look at what they have because Pittsburgh Public Schools, I don't know where they are now, but they were back when I worked there and Councilwoman Harris was actually on the board. They actually had an amazing tech department. I mean, everything that they did was far above. When I got here, I was shocked. And, and somebody told me the county was even worse. Now, I don't know, that's been 10 years, so a lot could have changed, obviously. But I just want to make sure that somebody looks into that. The other thing, when talking about the digital divide, one of the things we did, again, when Councilwoman Harris was on school board, was she made sure that there were computers that were being refurbished, and the refurbished computers were getting back out into the community. And one of the things I did was train the families on those computers. And how to use them, how to access and follow their children, how to help the kids with their homework, all that sort of thing. And it was one of the greatest programs. And now recently I worked with Computer Reach, and Computer Reach is refurbishing computers, and they're giving them out. We just distributed over 200, working with SALT, Save a Life Today, an organization in our district. But they're really, looking for ways. I think they're partnering with Housing Authority now on getting some of the computers out into our communities, and they're training folks now. So Computer Reach is really great, and I wonder if we're refurbishing our computers and making sure we're partnering with places like Computer Reach who are helping to bridge that digital divide. Are you familiar with them at all? Are you working with them?
I'm not familiar with them specifically, but we would love to connect with them. Again, I think that part of the spirit of the Rec to Tech project, which is really led out of the Parks Department with Max Dennison and
Right.
Director Ross. So, but we would love to connect with them, and again, our intent is to have the devices and be able to give them a second life afterwards. So, if you wouldn't mind making the introduction, that'd be
I would
great.
love to make that introduction because they're really doing amazing work. And the kids were so thrilled to receive those computers. Now, one of the really good programs that we just did, working with Mrs. Deborah Bailey, who was the president of the Sheridan Community Council, and she worked for CMU at the time. And she was my brother's assistant when I told you he was the dean at Carnegie Mellon. And she contacted somebody who was in charge of the dean of the computer science division, who took my brother's place when my brother retired. And he gave us laptops for the kids, trained our Pittsburgh police, and our Pittsburgh police in turn taught the kids coding in the schools. And you didn't have to attend to Pittsburgh public schools. You had to live in the city of Pittsburgh. It was it. And so that was another way to bridge the digital divide. But that was not only was that had multiple benefits. The community relationships building between the police and the kids, the schools were involved. But I'd like to see city parks offering that with you and partnering with you and CMU and the police and trying to figure out how to make that program a citywide program. That's it for me. Thank you. I know Councilwoman Harris has a lot of questions there. I'll leave it. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your work. It's been a pleasure working with you all.
Councilwoman Harris.
Yes, back to PPS. I can't even imagine that they don't still have the program going on, and it's probably better than it was 20 years ago. So, we're not even at the point of when I left the school board. We're just not there. Is there any plans of getting some of our own people, and I don't know all the technical words, the ones that write programs for the city of Pittsburgh so that we could have our own program?
So we, again, as part of the organizational chart that we're proposing, we'll have a dedicated software applications team. We're developing software standards, so we're thinking for major applications, buying the application as opposed to developing in-house. It tends to be more cost-effective because then we don't have to be spending all the money for the research and development. We can share it amongst all the customers. But we are having dedicated teams of people that are working on the software. And part of our request includes money to ensure that they have the training and the right resources to be, and we're again implementing. We're working closely with Carnegie Mellon and with other places to bring best practices when it comes to programming and when it comes to the management of the software.
How much out of this budget do you see going out to consultants?
There's very little that is going out to consultants. Most of it is going in terms of if there's money going to consultants, for the most part, is implementation partners, people helping bring up the software or some of the systems up and running. But I couldn't give you an answer up front. But there's very little just kind of regular consulting work being done, proposed in the budget.
Okay, because it seems like the city has, first they help you put the program in, then they have to be there for any time there's a problem with the program. Whereas if you have your own programs, you have your own staff that does that, other than keep bringing people in from the outside, which we're paying their overhead. And that's been a concern for years with me. The other concern is that our computers don't talk to each other. And I'll say this again, I think I say it every time we're here. Say, example would be real estate, a piece of real estate that we have. We're selling it. It's maybe condemned by PLI, and we're selling a piece of property that's already been torn down. So because you can't see what's happening with a piece of property all the way around, neither department knows what the other one's doing. Is anything working that we would finally start having these computers be able to at least be seen by, PLI and real estate? And what we had when I was on school board, we could just look. We couldn't change any of the numbers or anything, but we could see what was actually happening in each one of the departments, where I haven't been able to do that here yet.
Yeah, so we'll have dedicated team called the Data Services team, which is within the applications team that is precisely dedicated to do what you just described about making the computers talk to each other. So building all of the integrations, maintaining those integrations. So we're proposing, I think, 2 people dedicated in that function that's contemplated as the first part of the reorg. And again, using GIS as this kind of information hub for all the geographical information of the city. So we're going to start building that, and then as we start being more intentional about our software applications, making sure that they all talk to each other will be definitely upfront in our requirements.
I mean, I can't believe that we were doing that about 20 years ago with the school district, and the city still isn't at that point. But yet, every time we get a new director in, it's new and improved, but it's really not. It's just a different program that goes on. So I'm hoping this time that we actually have something that works. And as far as the snow plowing piece, is there going to be anything that actually shows that they are throwing salt instead of just riding up and down a street?
I'd have to check with the people that are working on the project, but my understanding is that we're installing the sensors that allow us to track what's going on in the trucks. So yeah.
Right, because it does take more because I have so many hills and valleys in my district. It takes more to do a hill than it does to do a flat street. And the vehicles can be going up and down streets and not be using any salt. So it appears that something's happening that's not really happening, and it'd be good if we had something with the sensors attached to it. And the print shop, from before I was even here, we had more than we have now. I mean, they could print and bind and had all the machinery that they needed. And somewhere someone decided, I forget what year it was, that we were to just use the counties, which was just going to cost more money for the city. And the people that we had did a great job, but we're down to zilch as far as printing goes. So is that shop going to be, are you getting, more equipment that they need?
Yeah, we have a line item for improvements to the print shop, and again, we're constantly looking forward to having conversations with the people that use it to figure out what is it that we need to make sure that it is delivering the things that people need it to do.
Right, and I always feel that if you talk to the people that actually do the job, they can tell you, what really is needed. And I've just seen them being looked over for years. Now we come to the Comcast and Verizon contracts. And council was always very, very involved with those. I remember them saying we weren't going to get something. We says, fine, then we don't need you. And they came up and did the same thing as the others. So I'm hoping that, Verizon and Comcast are giving what they should give back to the community. Then when the money comes in is another issue. PCTV, I think it's PCTV, was receiving money where it wasn't even coming in through. This was a while back. It was just going it wasn't going into any showing any money that we were getting, and it was going directly to PCTV. And that is how our guys and women that work on making sure the council's on television and the mayor's on television, and they can go around to different communities. But I'm not sure how much money out of the money it's coming in will be going to PCTV, and how much will be going to our staff that work on, say, council and the mayor, or whatever we need to go up.
Yeah, so we've requested a 1-year extension of the agreement with PCTV as is, but next year, as part of the franchise agreement renegotiation, we're proposing that we revisit also the agreement with PCTV. Again, with the changes that the FCC is doing, they're really forcing us to be creative about how is it that we can meet the needs of the community. So we'll be looking at working with PCTV, but also with some of the other players in the community television space in the area to figure out how is it that we can do the best job of providing a great PEG television environment for our residents.
Well, I mean, it's nice having PCTV. People do put programming on it. I don't know how many watch it. But again, for the public's sake, to be able to actually see what's happening in their government is just as important, if not more important, because it's really coming in and touching their lives as far as, are you raising my taxes? Are you spending my tax money properly? And that can all be done by the people that work for us. So I really consider the people that work for us and, put us on television, the mayor, if we go outside, have the cameras, so they can take different things in the community, I think is just as important, if not more important. So this year, how is the money being spent?
I'd have to check back, but I'd agree that our team, our cable TV team, is great and they do an awesome job. And we asked them about any plan needs, and that's being covered by the budget. But I would have to go and look more information to answer your specific
So
question.
does that help them with another staff person so that they
Those
can
monies are
go out?
restricted. Those monies are restricted that come in through the franchise agreement. We cannot use them for staff members. We can only use them for capital improvements and equipment.
Okay. Well, there's a way to move money around to get what you need. So, that's how you actually help. If you're sending it out to someplace else, I'm sure they're using it towards their staff just as much as they are equipment. It's just how money is moved around. And just having 3 or 4 people to try to go out and take care of a whole city is really kind of tough. And at one time, there were 20 staff people in that department. And now we're down to, 3, 4, something like that. How many people?
On the cable channel team,
Yes.
we have 4 people.
4. So I think it's important. I think it's important. We used to have programming on that the community really enjoyed. Whether it was, they brought something on every day, which was right in the city of Pittsburgh, that everyone doesn't know about. So I would really look into that. I did have. So is council is council going to be somewhere on that board of that will be talking with Comcast and Verizon?
We haven't decided yet how we're going to conduct the negotiation. We're working with our attorneys to do all the preliminary work, but we haven't made any decisions.
Okay, well, I think it worked a lot better because you got a taste of what the community was about and what was really needed. So, and a lot of times, one will play politics, over the other and say, we can't do this. Example, we wouldn't have had either have a shop in a city, but yet they wanted all of our business. And the people in Pittsburgh are the ones that actually, paid those bills. So that was changed very quickly, and we do have a shop in for each Verizon and Comcast. And I forget what it was. Well, anyhow, there were a number of different things that are important, and I'm not sure if you work just in the office every day, and the council is out and about, see what's really needed out there. So it would be nice to have somebody with our budget director involved. I think that's all the questions that I had for right now. If you can give me some of that information, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I just have a couple of comments and then a few, questions after that. My main comments are around the entirety of the presentation and the budget requests. One is that I am so happy that you're focusing on the true infrastructure needs, because if we don't have strong infrastructure, I compare it to roads and bridges and water lines. If we don't have strong infrastructure, any other innovation that we layer on top of that is going to be somewhat worthless. And so I'm really, really pleased that much of what we're investing in is the cybersecurity, is access to internet and to the network, and ensuring that we have that in our core places and in the sort of tertiary places as well, that that's what we're really investing in this year. Because and in innovation, yes, we're continuing the innovative projects that we've launched in years past. And the other point I wanted to make, just to make it clear to my colleagues and to anyone who might be watching, is just reiterating what you already said, that the majority of what INP does is serve other departments, that it's very little relative to other departments' asks from the budget goes to INP. Majority goes to police and PLI and council and mayor's office and all sorts of others. So I think you've made that clear with the numbers that you show, but also in conversations that we've had, just how much of what we approve throughout the year, in fact, our agreements, our software upgrades, our continuing contracts with companies that serve other departments aside from INP. You're there to serve, just like council's here to serve the public. A couple of comments. The conversation around internet access and the sort of digital divide. I wanted to also make you aware, if you weren't already, that the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh has started loaning out hotspots and laptops just this past year, or perhaps last year in 2018. And so that's a program that I wanted you to be aware of in case there's a partnership there to be had, especially with some of our useful but no longer useful to the city equipment. And the second thing, obviously we need to close the digital divide. We need to get over that. But in the meantime, I think that's a helpful program, among others that Councilwoman Cal Smith mentioned, and others that you're working on, Rec Detect and others. On the snowplow, everybody's favorite issue. Speaking of infrastructure, I don't expect you to answer this today, but just as Councilwoman Harris mentioned, the hills and the valleys, and it's sort of interesting how we think about what's a priority and what's not a priority, and I think it's where we can, it's really important for us to understand both your team and DPW to understand what's really the human experience on the ground, and snow plowing is a perfect example of that. Yes, we need to ensure that our main arteries are clear so that people can, because they're the most highly traveled by car and by foot and by bike. So that's really important. Boulevard of the Allies, Fifth Forbes in my district, others in other districts. But how are we factoring in, both on your end and on DPW's end, the hills? Where does that come in? Is that as much of a priority as our main arteries by virtue of it being a hill, even if it's a secondary or tertiary street? So again, feel free to respond to that, but I'm not expecting you to necessarily today. Just hope that that's being taken into account. The other thing is, and Councilwoman Gross is on the Gender Equity Commission, but they are initiating a whole project to look at gendered budgeting, so that by the 2021 budget, we are looking at budgeting through a gendered lens to ensure that that the status quo is actually equitable and equal. And one example I've been given around that is how we look at snow plowing. Is snow plowing done to benefit those who are going to work? Or are we taking into account snow plowing to schools and to child care centers and to others to ensure that there's an equity there? So that there's equity there, not inequity. So I look forward to those conversations happening as well. I know that they will be meeting with all departments, and wanted to just plant that seed now so that you're ready for the 2021 budget. I have no other questions. Any final thoughts that you have for council or for the general public?
Thank you again for listening to our presentation, and if there's other questions, let us know and we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director and Deputy Director. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you, Director Urbanek. We are going to take a short recess as we anticipate the next hearing with the URA, Housing Opportunity Fund, and Pittsburgh Land Bank that Councilman O'Connor is chairing. So we'll take a short recess and reconvene after that. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome to Council's reconvene meeting of the budget. We are joined by Councilman Lavelle and Councilwoman Strasburger. This afternoon or early afternoon, we have the URA who will be presenting. I'm going to pass it off to our budget director, Bill Urbanek, to talk about the budget impacts this year for the URA, and then they have a presentation for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councilman. The Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh is the City of Pittsburgh's economic development agency committed to creating jobs, expanding the city's tax base, and improving the vitality of city businesses and neighborhoods. The URA achieves this mission by assembling, preparing, and conveying sites for major mixed-use developments, and by providing a portfolio of programs that include financing for business location, relocation, and expansion, housing construction and rehabilitation, and home purchases and improvements. Councilman Lavelle is our representative on the Urban Redevelopment Authority's board. Under the URA, the city as well does the Housing Trust Fund. In 2015-2016, the City of Pittsburgh assembled an affordable housing task force to better understand the affordable housing needs across the city. The task force recommended the city establish a housing trust fund. And as a response to the need for affordable housing, the Housing Opportunity Fund was created. The Housing Opportunity Fund is overseen by an advisory board and a governing board. The Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board is composed of 17 Pittsburgh residents, including Councilwoman Carol Smith, and the URA acts as the governing board for the Housing Opportunity Fund. The city provides $10 million per year, up to $10 million per year, to the URA for the Housing Opportunity Fund. Also under the URA for discussion is the Pittsburgh Land Bank. The Pittsburgh Land Bank was created in 2014. Council members Cale Smith, Lavelle, and Burgess are on the Land Bank board. Economic impacts and the 2020 budget highlights for the URA. There is one URA revenue in the city's operating budget. That's $522,000. It's reimbursement for the 420 Boulevard of the Allies building. There are multiple URA expenditures in the operating budget. $10 million in finance for the transfer to the Housing Opportunity Fund. Within the debt principal and interest line items, $871,000 of that is for URA's share of the 420 Boulevard. The Land Bank is not represented in either of these budgets and has not been since 2018 was the last operating expenditure for them. Also, there's a number, URA helps to do a number of capital projects, and there's a good bit of money. So I'm going to read quickly down these capital and community development block grant budget line items. The Home Investment Partnerships Program, the Home Program Administration is $200,000. The CHDO operating is $100,000. The Home Program Workforce for Sale Housing is $1.5 million, and the Home Program Workforce Rental Housing is $300,000. Under the Housing Development line item, there's the Owner-Occupied Housing Rehabilitation, it's $480,000. Residential Facade Improvements, $150,000 in PAYGO funds. Workforce for Sale Housing, $600,000 Community Development Block Grant Funds. Workforce for Rental, also $600,000 in CDBG funds is being dedicated. Larmer Choice Neighborhood, $181,000 in CDBG funds and $110,000 in PAYGO funds will be dedicated to Larmer Choice Neighborhood. Center Avenue Rehabilitation is $400,000 in PAYGO funds. Neighborhood Initiatives Fund is $600,000 of CDBG funds. Equitable Empowerment Program, $240,000 in CDBG funds. Pittsburgh Entrepreneurial Support, $300,000 in CDBG funds. Personnel for CDBG Administration and Compliance for the URA is $500,000. Land Care Program, City-Owned Properties, $250,000, and Land Care Program URA properties, $300,000. That's for a total of $3,500,000 in CDBG funds and $1,200,000 in PAYGO funds. There are $2.1 million in home funds. That's a total of $6.5 million for those line items. Additionally, the 62nd Street Warehouse Expansion Project is being conducted to allow the URA to develop the facilities building uptown. That is the 67th Street Warehouse Expansion line item. That is $1.6 million in bond funds. From a comparison to last year's mayor's budget proposal, the total amount of CDBG was $2 million. Total amount of PAYGO was $618,000. So there's, and with $1.5 million in other funds, there's a difference of about $2.3 million additional going, being dedicated in the mayor's proposed budget for 2020. And that's what I got.
All right, thank you, Director. We're also joined by Councilwoman Gross, Harris, and Smith. I will pass it off to the URA for the presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Diamante Walker, the Deputy Executive Director for the Urban Redevelopment Authority. I'd like to thank this body for having us here this morning to walk through our budgetary ask for the year 2020. With me, I have Mr. David Geiger, our Government Affairs Officer, and Ms. Holland Numa, our Chief Financial Officer. I'm going to, if it's okay, walk through the presentation. You can ask questions and interrupt me through the presentation. I also have a time slot at the end for questions and discussion?
Yeah, we'll do questions
Okay.
at the end, and we'll begin with Councilman Lavelle because he's on the board. Questions at the end.
Oh.
Yeah.
We start with other.
Yeah, she asked what the process was. Then we're going to do questions after.
Starting with Councilman Lavelle.
Yes.
Got it. Making sure I understood.
So as you are aware, the URA is an agency that is in transition. We are going through a leadership transition, and we are also recalibrating to address the critical needs of the city of Pittsburgh as they exist here in the 21st century. So our driving focus has been to create a city of inclusive opportunity. So our mission statement is changing. So we will start with our why, and why do we exist? Why do we come to work every day on behalf of this great city? We exist to support the city of Pittsburgh's economic development goals, which are designed to create a city of inclusive opportunity for residents, stakeholders, and communities. That is sort of our North Star right now. During 2019, we began to do some internal analysis and to look at what our core focus should be based on what we were hearing from this body, from the mayor's office, from residents and community stakeholders. And so our emerging focus is to create more affordable housing, more housing that is affordable to the average Pittsburgher. We want to encourage more entrepreneurship and small business development. We want to promote inclusive growth and quality job creation in a manner that serves all residents, and to expand our neighborhood and Main Street revitalization efforts. We'll need to do this with a talented workforce that is equipped with the skills of the future. And so this budgetary presentation will sort of walk through our work and how we deliver on those 5 bullet points. But before I get into that, I want to walk you through very quickly the transition that the URA has undergone in 2019. In January or February of 2019, Sam Williamson was appointed as the URA's board chair. Mr. Kevin Ackland stepped down. Between April and June, Robert Rubenstein stepped down as the executive director. He's typically here with you, so this is my first time here, and probably going to be my last time, as the new incoming executive director will be here in January 2020. In July, the board appointed me as the deputy director and interim executive director until such time they could locate a new executive director. And I'm happy to report that a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Greg Flissrum was appointed as the new executive director, and he will start with us on January 13, 2020. So a lot of change has happened.
After the budget.
So a lot of change has happened here. And so, when I took on this interim directorship, the board asked me to start to do some preliminary work to prepare for new leadership, to certainly make it easier for candidates to understand the URA and what they would be taking on as the leader of this organization. So we restructured our work into 3 core focuses. One being the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, that's our small business development lending arm. The Center for Community and Economic Development, that focuses a lot on our real estate transactions, our economic development work, neighborhood investment. And then the Center for Housing Opportunities, which manages the Housing Opportunity Fund and a lot of our housing development needs for workforce and affordable housing. And so there is a chart available to you in the slide deck that sort of shows the relationship between those centers and the common threads between them, to make sure that we have cross-functional coverage and that we sort of know what's happening throughout the agency to create a better end-user experience. At the core of our work, people have reemerged as central to what we do. So that's a focus on policy, strategy, communications, doing deeper outreach and administrative function, as well as intergovernmental coordination. So that's some of the change that we've undergone over these past few months. And so there's another document here that kind of shows you those 3 centers and the work that falls within those 3 centers and how they map to the budget. So we get a lot of questions about our org chart and how we're structured. And so what I've provided for you today is a very simplified sort of org chart for you, showing our 3 functions. The administration group, the development group, and the consumer serving group. And so our administrative group is sort of our legal, HR, and finance function. Our development group, that is the economic development team. Mr. Robert Rubenstein transitioned to special projects, working with the economic development division, real estate and engineering and construction. And then our more consumer-facing groups are the Center for Housing Opportunities and the Center for Innovation Entrepreneurship. So you will see a representation there of how those teams sort of work together to deliver on economic development activities for the city of Pittsburgh. As the new executive director comes in, all those folks will report up through him, and I will be managing the Office of Strategic Policy and Communications. So one thing that I'd like to share with you so that you have a little bit of insight into our operating budget, which is very different than our capital expenditure. So this is how we fund our operations. How do we keep the lights on in our building and keep folks paid to keep doing this work? So there are essentially 3 categories where our monies are sourced from. That's government revenue, income from our assets, and then income from our programs and services. And that's a total revenue capture of about $13.3 million. So that's available to you in the packet so that you can see that this is how we pay for our operations. And so if you need another graphical representation that sort of shows you that the lion's share is sort of split between government revenue and then our own income streams. And as we look at financial sustainability, we're going to try to figure out how to get that government revenue number down and get those other numbers increased. But as we're making that transition, we certainly still need the support of our local, federal, and state government. And we'll continue to need that support. So if you look at so that was our sources, those were our sources. So if you look at our uses, how are we spending the money? So the lion's share of our operating budget is through our employment costs. That's wages and salaries, payroll taxes, and fringe benefits. And then we have some administrative costs to, make sure that we have IT, that we have professional development for our staff, and other administrative expenses as they occur. And that matches to about $13.4 million. And so while it's very easy to talk about our staff as a line item budget, a line item in the budget, I think of them as the folks that I get the privilege to work with every day. So I brought a picture here so you can see when I say the URA, these are the folks that I'm talking about. These are the folks that make it happen. And so we've done a lot of work this year to sort of drive this team forward and prepare for new leadership. Okay. So delivering on a robust economic development agenda. So we've asked for about $25 million in this budgetary ask. It takes about $150 million to really deliver on the types of things that we need to deliver on to keep Pittsburgh livable for all. And so I've broken down those costs. For affordable housing, it's about $50 million. For entrepreneurship and small business development, $20 million. When we're talking about inclusive growth and quality job creation that's achieved through major projects, it's about a $60 million capital deployment. Expanding neighborhoods and Main Street revitalization efforts, $10 million. And then developing a workforce that is equipped with the skills of the future, that's about $10 million. So those numbers are based on some internal modeling that the URA did as we prepared to submit an ask to this body. And so if you look at that, that's $150 million. The URA's projected investment for 2020 is about $126 million of capital expenditure. It's pretty much what we do year over year. Our ask this year was for about $24 million to fill that gap. We were awarded 6.3. That leaves us with a gap of $17.7 million to deliver on the things that we've identified as important for growing an inclusive economy in Pittsburgh. Please note that these are internal modeling figures and that the Housing Opportunity Fund is included in that, although it comes from the city's operating budget. We do want to thank and acknowledge the city of Pittsburgh for that investment and certainly talk about how the URA, with additional support, could begin to optimize that investment. And so our goals, you have this document in front of you, so I'm not going to read it off to you, but it basically shows you the amount that we requested and the amount that was awarded and what we're trying to achieve. So, affordable housing was funded at $4 million. We asked for 6.3, and we'll talk a little bit more later about why that 2.3 is so critical and so important to the work that we need to do. So when we talk about creating a housing that is more affordable to the average Pittsburgher, so we certainly need funding that is above and beyond the Housing Opportunity Fund, and here's why. The Housing Opportunity Fund was to build upon the work and the investments the URA was already making. Without that additional support, we will not be able to effectively leverage the work of the Housing Opportunity Fund. So we've made some changes to our programs this year so that they better align with the Housing Opportunity Fund and fill the gaps that the Housing Opportunity Fund cannot fill. But that $2.3 million is going to be critical to delivering on affordable housing in 2020. So who does affordable housing help? These are construction workers, office administrative folks, service industries, transportation, retail, personal care support folks, healthcare support, and other groups. When we talk about workforce housing, those are our teachers, our nurses, our police officers, our firefighters, hourly employees, administrative professionals, and skilled laborers. So when we're talking about making these investments, these are the folks that we are investing in. And I'm going to look at 2019's commitments and closings. If you look at this map, it will show you where we've invested and how we've invested. You can see that there's pretty good coverage across the city of Pittsburgh. I'm going to ask for Jessica Smith-Perry to come up for a moment and talk a little bit about the Housing Opportunity Fund, since it was on the agenda, and walk us through the commitments and closings for 2019.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, so thank you so much for the last 2 years of commitment to the Housing Opportunity Fund. It's been a crazy 18 months since we got started, but we're super proud of the stats that you see on the slide there. You can see how many households we've helped. The top, the blue and the green, is the development, the new development of units. And I can tell you without a doubt that over the last year, our phones have been ringing so much more with people saying, I cannot find a unit to live in. I mean, we have gotten this request time and time again, almost every day. Somebody calls asking us to help them find a unit because they're looking and they can't find anything that's affordable to them. So building the new affordable units, it's really critical for the city. The study, when the Housing Opportunity Fund was created, said that we were short 20,000 units, and we're definitely feeling that every day. So you can see the unit counts that we created there, with 413 so far in 2019. This is with the HOF money and the home money and the CDBG that we received last year. And you can also see the affordable for sale homes that we have committed, 14. And then the preservation of existing rental units. These are deals, Councilman O'Connor just left, but these are deals like Riverview Towers in Squirrel Hill, where we have preserved 738 units. And we've also preserved a lot of affordable for sale homes, 77. That's through primarily the Community Development Corporations acquiring, rehabbing, and reselling houses. And then under the helping out, this is something I think we're extremely proud of. We've really vamped up over the last year what we call our consumer programs, primarily for existing homeowners and for people who want to be homeowners. And you can see in 2019, we've committed or completed the repairs for 158 homeowners' houses. This is one of our most popular programs with HOF, and we've been using more the HOF money to fund this than we originally thought. And the map that you saw previously, you can see that we are in all of your districts doing this, the homeowner repair. Yeah, you can see it there. The pink and the dark pink are the homeowner repair and also the purchasing of new homes for our down payment. And you can see we are all over the city with those programs. And our staff is out at a lot of community meetings, and with all of your help as well, we've really been able to reach out to every neighborhood in the city with this. We've done, the dark pink is the down payment closing cost assistance program, and we've done 65 of those since we opened it last March or April. And then on the homeowner repair, that didn't get opened until May, and we have about 15 complete, another 50 under construction, and another 50 right there in the queue. So we're pretty excited about that.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we encourage more entrepreneurship and small business development. We know that small businesses are the turbine of our economy. So in our budgetary ask for 2020, we asked for $3 million spread across those initiatives. What was funded was this Community Development Investment Fund and Equitable Empowerment Program. What we did not see funded was the Micro Enterprise Fund Program and the Street Face Facade Program and some other items. So that was $540,000. And so we'll talk a little bit about our pipeline and how it's going to be challenging to meet this unprecedented pipeline of small businesses who want to revitalize our neighborhoods and need access to capital. And our pipeline may exceed our resources and ability to lend. So I'm going to ask Jennifer Wilhelm to step up for a moment and walk us through a little bit of information about CIE and the pipeline.
My glasses on.
Do you need an extra copy?
Thank you all for being here. That's helpful. Thank you. So as Diamante mentioned, the URA has robust programs to support small businesses, and we have been doing that in all of your districts now for a very long time. Some of our newest programs that have taken off, the Micro Enterprise Program, which now we're expecting to do actually over $1 million next year. We're projecting in lending, and roughly 80 to 90% of those individuals, based on today's numbers, will be businesses run by women or minority individuals. So that program is going gangbusters, and we couldn't be more proud of the impact that it's making. Overall, the work that we are doing, especially in the facades, which we don't get that money back, those are grant dollars that go out, and without additional support for those programs, unfortunately, we don't have the dollars to put forth. And those are the facades you're seeing in your neighborhoods, you're seeing in the Main Street districts. We've touched on all neighborhoods through our facade programs. I would also say that a lot of our dollars are going, as Diamante mentioned, into really helping businesses in the communities, those small businesses, a lot of minority businesses. We've been using our dollars to support efforts. For example, Catapult, which you may know of in East Liberty. It is a robust business incubation program that has been very successful for its first cohort in East Liberty. 15 minority businesses were helped through that program that the URA has generously supported to get it off the ground. You'll see there that they've opened a storefront on Penn Avenue. If you have not visited, you should certainly do so. Many of the businesses that went through that program are now operating in there, and the program is being extended. We're very excited about that. We are looking to help that program grow to other neighborhoods to help more small businesses. So these are very tangible things that we are doing. You can go to these shops, you can see their progress, you can buy their goods. So it's definitely not hypothetical. These are on the ground initiatives that we are putting forth.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I want to show you our entrepreneurs. When Jennifer says that a lot of them are minorities and women, these are the faces of the businesses that we've invested in. Black female-owned electrical company who's had a lot of work on URA projects. So not only do we invest in these businesses, but then we find business opportunities for them right there within the URA. Again, this microloan program was not funded in the 2020 budget. It is something that it is a mission-driven program, which means it's not a revenue generator for the URA, but it's certainly important to ensuring that there's equitable development and equitable lending happening within our communities. So if you were to look at where the URA has shown up between 2018 and 2019, this is where a lot of our monies have been deployed. We see a lot of small business growth and activity happening in these regions. And if you don't see dots, it's because they may be able to, those communities may be able to get lending from somewhere else. And the URA is filling that gap and showing up where other lenders may not be.
I just want to say, it seems like there was a big gap there. That's what I'm going to say that.
And so revitalizing business districts to encourage investment. So this was another thing that was not funded in the 2020 budget, but if we want to see the fabric of our business districts reknit, we certainly need to invest in them, and the way we do that is through small business. This was the Catapult program. We hope to be able to scale this program in 2020 to other neighborhoods. That's going to be a greater challenge because it was not funded in this budgetary ask, but we will certainly do our best. Jennifer mentioned the facade programs. So here are two examples of facade renovations that the URA helped to make possible. One is the Mocha Art Gallery in the Hill District, and the other one there, Jennifer, you know that building better than I do, I think. can't see it.
No, I'm not sure what it is.
Okay, I'm not sure what picture that is. It's too far away for me to see, but it's certainly here within the city of Pittsburgh. And so if we look at we look at the 2018 closings versus where we are here in November, you will see that this program continues to grow. It's $18 million, and we're not even to the end of the year. A good portion of those companies minority or women-owned. So next we'll talk a little bit about expanding neighborhood and Main Street revitalization efforts in a manner that promotes inclusive growth and quality job creation. So we asked for $2.2 million in this budget, and we were awarded $550,000 in part for the land care program and then the management of vacant structures. And so our real estate department has done a lot of work to look at our 2020 goals and what we really want to focus on when it comes to the assets that we own in communities. So that's asset management, that's improving sidewalks, that's preventing the spread of blight, creating affordable retail opportunities. And what we found is that these investments intersect directly at quality of life for our residents. Having a sidewalk that makes your community a walkable community, or not having to look at blight, has positive psychological impacts on residents, and we certainly like to continue to invest in those activities. So inventory management, this is a dot map that sort of shows you where we're doing project management, where we've done demolitions, where we've done some storefront activity throughout 2018 to 2019. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but I want to highlight what this body made possible, which is the Neighborhood Initiative Fund that was released in 2019 using 2018 funds to drive home why it's so important that we continue the levels of investment as requested. So the Neighborhood Initiative Fund basically takes monies awarded to the URA, and we start focusing on how to anchor neighborhoods and main streets, increase job skills, transform vacant lots, and improve access to community services. I'm going to ask Sushila Namani Stenger to come up and talk a little bit about the Neighborhood Initiative Fund and how this is a demonstrable example of what it means to invest in the URA, and by doing that, investing in Pittsburgh's neighborhoods.
Thanks. So, as you know, we had our first pilot round for the Neighborhood Initiatives Fund in 2019. We were not sure what kind of response we received, and it was overwhelming. We received 47 applications, and for the first round, we had $850,000 available. Those 47 applications totaled $2.4 million. So what that told us was that there's a real need for neighborhood funds for placemaking efforts, for public realm, historic preservation, and Main Street activities. So what we've been doing is real technical assistance and capacity building work for not just the grants that we've awarded to the 18 grantees, but the work that's needed to get the other grantees who we were not able to award funds to get them up to a point where they may be ready for a second round. So thank you for penciling in funding for a second round in 2020. We're really excited, and this shows you who received awards for the first round for Tier 1 and Tier 2. But we learned a lot through the release of that grant funding round. One thing that it did is it really formalized the technical assistance and community capacity building work that we already do, but it put it in a set of guidelines and an application process that made it easier for communities and neighborhood groups to navigate. And as you know, the NIF funds only nonprofits. So we're really excited about that.
So the other focus is property stabilization. You know, a lot of these properties that are at risk could be brought back onto the tax rolls if we invest in them early enough and we prevent them from needing to be demolished, or we demolish them before they become a health and safety risk to the community. So our ask for this was $1.9 million. We were funded at $300,000. And this shows year over year the amount that we've requested and the amount that we've been funded. We're certainly grateful for anything that is sent to the URA, but we do want to demonstrate the actual need versus the funding level that's been awarded. And so when we talk about keeping sidewalks safe for residents, this is an example in Hazelwood of a three-phased sort of a sidewalk repair initiative that has now set the stage for an RFP release to revitalize the 4800 block of 2nd Avenue. And then talking about the opportunity to preserve instead of demolishing. So in the Hill District, this house here was owned by a Hill District resident, and it was going to be demolished. And so the real estate team was able to work with the CDC through their Hill District 100 program to demolish the back end portion, but to now preserve this home, which will be an affordable opportunity for a Hill District resident. So we could do more of this with the right levels of support and funding, so that this could have been a missing tooth on a historic corridor, and now that has been restored to a very beautiful home that somebody will enjoy for years to come. And so our land care program, I'm going to ask Nathan Clark, our Director of Real Estate, to come up and talk a little bit about the land care program and how this has become a workforce development program that the board commissioned us to be more inclusive in the contracts that we were awarding for the maintenance of URA land. And so Nathan will walk us through that program and its evolution and where we're headed in 2020.
Thank you. We released our third RFP for land care earlier in September, and are awarding contracts for 2 years, so all of 2020 and 2021. We've learned some valuable lessons from going down this path. One is that local contractors, folks that are based in their community, just simply do a better job maintaining the lots. They have more invested in them. Two is that using this method, we've actually decreased our per square foot cost to maintain our properties. It's gone down each year. And I think third is that this is a really wonderful workforce opportunity. We've seen land care contractors start as subcontractors in their first year and grow to have a full bundle of property in 2020 and 2021. The mayor's budget this year did include money to be transferred to the URA for the maintenance of city properties, I believe $250,000. So we've been working with city staff to come up with a bundle of properties that helped us expand into areas and neighborhoods that we hadn't been in before, and are adding what we call bundles, but basically 2 bundles due to that amount. And while this neighborhood is, while this project is a wonderful workforce opportunity, it is administrative heavy. Our staff has to work closely with these land care providers, especially as they're getting started up on everything from the technology that we use, so folks can look on a live map and see where properties in their neighborhood have been maintained, to submitting invoices. So again, we're really thankful for what you've given us this year. We're really happy to partner with the city, and any additional funding that we think can go to this program would be well worth it.
Thank you, Nathan. So we just have 2 slides left, and then we're going to open it up for questions. This is the intergovernmental and major projects ask. This is the bulk of the ask. So there was a $5 million capital budget request for 2020, projecting out for 3 years for an $11 million ask. And what that would allow is to leverage $186 million in non-city investments. It could support more than 4,000 local jobs for construction and more than 4,100 permanent jobs. And so this is very critical to building the workforce that we talked about there for the 21st century. And then this is another recap of how the Neighborhood Initiative Fund sort of dovetails and provides direct support to nonprofits and neighborhood organizations. And so if we, before we part, certainly want to give you another capture of the goals and the amount requested, the amount awarded, and then what we believe would be mission-critical adjustments that could be made to the budgetary ask to allow us to deliver on these objectives in a formidable way. It would take us from $6.3 million to $11.1 million. You see that we've blotted out the workforce for the URA. We're going to continue our workforce analysis and try to marshal our own resources for this year because we believe that it's critically important to reroute some of those dollars that could potentially come to us for staffing for capital expenditure. That's not something that we can do year over year in a sustainable way, but we believe that we are on the cusp of something great when it comes to affordable housing and small business investment, so it's another sacrifice that we're willing to make. I'm going to open it up for your questions and discussion, and thank you for allowing me to present today. And thank you, URA staff, for coming up and talking.
Thank you. And I'm going to open up to members. We're going to start with Councilman Lavelle, but I do want to remind members that we have a meeting with the mayor at 1:30, and it's about 20 after 12. So if you'll keep your questions to the point and get the answers really quickly so that we can make sure we're on time for the mayor. So thank you. And we'll start with Councilman Lavelle.
Sure. So I have no questions. Rather, I will work with members as well as the budget office on proposed amendments to the budget.
And Councilman Gross?
Thank you. Yes, I would. So when you started your presentation, Councilman Lavelle explained to me that the things at the top of these budget lines, which are the kind of smaller dollar ones that were all zeroed out, the micro enterprise, the storefront renovation, the neighborhood business district, and also the kind of, I would have to say, also the housing development, all of the aspects that for me are about affordability and equity, and also preserving local wealth and increasing local wealth. So this is, for years the URA has been coming here talking about just increasing the tax base, and I have said that is not your mission, not according to me. And so, and I have the enabling legislation from 1945 on my desk, as I always say, and that was not the mission of the enabling legislation. But for many decades, it was the interpretation of the URA and its board that should be their mission. And I don't see that to be the most important aspect of the mission right now. So I'm glad that I see at the beginning of your presentation that you have a different focus, really, that is about investing in actual Pittsburghers, right? And so I am, I'm going to start with the end because I was happy to see a lot of these programs, and I believe that there should be these, not be so many blanks in the program fundings for many of these programs that are investing in real, actual Pittsburgh residents, either businesses or residents. And I would have every year qualified my criticisms of the URA by saying, I really support the lending programs, the micro enterprise programs, and the kind of neighborhood programs. I've always been concerned with the last page here, which is the major developments. And especially since it's just a different historic moment. 20 years ago, there wasn't any other developer building anything, a gas station, building a single house. That the URA was the only person building anything in the city of Pittsburgh, and that is just not true right now, and it has been true for some years. So what you didn't say on this last page was, what are these developments that are still what I consider the kind of legacy programs that you guys are still just kind of carrying on your backs? What are these programs that are these? I didn't hear what they are, and they're too small for me to read, even though I have magnifying glasses.
I'm going to ask Sheila to come up and answer that question, but if you look on the document that does the crosswalk, you will see some of the major projects, intergovernmental
Okay, so
projects.
that was my second question. It does appear that this is nicely corresponding. You've used the same vocabulary in budget lines, so I really appreciate that, because it will be a lot easier to look more carefully across them. So thank you.
Yeah, the naming convention of major projects as a line item has carried with our budget for decades, and I've tried to have this name changed a few times to what it really should be, which is intergovernmental special projects. Because when the public invests in a community asset, the public intervention is either stimulating growth or managing growth. And for the projects that we've outlined in the intergovernmental major projects line item, we're really preserving a community asset and preserving that asset for the public. So the funding that we requested under that line item includes the Greater Pittsburgh Homeland Coliseum, Center Avenue revitalization, which did have a penciled in number for this budget. The Lower Hill, and I'll get back to that in a second, and the Hon Armory. So the Hon Armory will be a community facility. In order to have it be a community facility, the public does need to invest in it for it to be open to the public. Otherwise, it will be a private facility that pencils out and debt and equity will be raised. But if it's to be open to the public as an ice skating facility, it does require public investment. The Lower Hill, in order to have a say, in order to participate, in order to leverage that private investment for public good, there is a need for public investment. Center Avenue revitalization, that's really neighborhood and Main Street revitalization in an important corridor in the Hill District. It's been talked about a lot over the past month and a half. And then the Greater Pittsburgh Homeland Coliseum, we were lucky enough to acquire that site, and we do want to continue to maintain that property as a public asset. And we don't know yet what it will be when it grows up, when we're able to stabilize it and redevelopment. We're going to work with the community to identify that, but what we know is that it's an important community asset, and in order to preserve it as such, we do need to have some sort of public investment in it. So that's generally. So major projects really should be intergovernmental special projects. That's right. We're not investing in private real estate with this funding. We're not investing in a corporate headquarters, bricks and mortar skyscraper project. These are community facilities.
So I think I just want to acknowledge that shift. So I do kind of see it there. So thank you for that. That
Thanks.
There is not just this emphasis that, well, any developer anywhere is something the ORA should support. That day is done. Are we done? Can we say that we're actually done with that day?
We're transitioning.
Okay. Because we have had so many out-of-town developers come into Pittsburgh that I'm concerned that they're literally taking away more than they're bringing in, right? If they weren't making a profit, then they would be putting in more than they're taking away. If they're making a profit, which it looks like they are from the rents that they're charging and the occupancy that they have, that they are literally extracting more dollars away from Pittsburgh than they are putting in. So it isn't really economic development for Pittsburgh. It's more like economic extraction, like wealth extraction. And so we need to be very mindful that we are using a redevelopment authority to reinvest in our people, right? You are the city's redevelopment authority, not Cleveland's redevelopment authority, not New York's redevelopment authority, not the 5 Brooklyn developers redevelopment authority. You're the city of Pittsburgh's redevelopment authority. So we really want to be mindful, I think, when we are even moving a penny from here over to your board, that it is being an investment in Pittsburgh and not just facilitating our residents' dollars leaving and going somewhere else. Even if, keep in mind, like even if the property stays the same in value, right? If it goes from a Pittsburgh owner who's paying property tax of $10 a year to the city of Pittsburgh, and then he sells or she sells to Cleveland or Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is still paying that $10 per year in property tax, the wealth, the assets have left, even though that building is still here. And that's what I'm seeing too much of in my district. And I know that my district is not the same as other people's districts, but I think that it's still important for us to ask those questions here. Are we really getting the better end of the deal or not? And it's time for those questions. I am very supportive and concerned that the budget does not fund these projects, again, that I think are the public dollars that could be going into, right? We've zeroed out public dollars going into actual mom and pop businesses, family businesses. Mm-hmm. That's what I think your mission is.
Yeah.
That there should be dollars in growing minority-owned businesses. Should be a given. And I don't see public dollars going in there.
We agree.
that there's, the affordable housing has been reduced, it's still substantial, but we know that it's our people that we're housing because they're here, they're in our city boundaries, and it's not our job to force them to leave the city because there is no housing for them here. And I want to acknowledge, I'll wrap up because I just, I got to get those few points that are important to me out, that this morning I toured Wood Street Commons for the first time, and it is an SRO that would not be there, a single room occupancy, for those who don't know, that wouldn't be there without the URA's participation. And I think that that's the kind of critical housing type that we lack, that used to be filled in each one of our neighborhoods that had either a boarding and lodging house like Needs Hotel or Brewers, which is in the border of Lawrenceville and the Strip District, or the YMCAs that we had in so many significant places that are being gobbled up by the private market now. As I was reminded this morning, the Ace Hotel, the boutique hotel, that are selling 5 of them in the United States, and it's really hip and fancy, and I go to lots of events there, and they have a nice rentable space that people have events for, was a YMCA. And that might have been very affordable housing if the private market hadn't bought it. You can live in these single room occupancies for under $400 a month. And we just lost one that was a private one in Bloomfield, where we worked closely with the landlord, the new owner who bought it, who is a regional developer. Very tiny storefront building, but there were 12 people living in that, maybe 14 living in that building, right on Liberty Avenue, right at a very popular bus stop, for under $400 a month.
Our ability to do strategic acquisition is greatly limited by this budget. So where the URA might be able to intervene without some of these line items filled back in, we just do not have the resources to compete against the private market for strategic acquisition the way that we would like to preserve affordability and other assets in communities.
I just want to acknowledge that for the public, that the market is just a lot more expensive than it was 10 years ago.
That's true.
So that's why we're so challenged to do this work, right? There are neighborhoods that had affordable housing that just don't have them anymore. So I think that's it for, I can wrap it up there. We can have other conversations at other times. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. They've been very helpful.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the work that you do and for your presentation today. It's really helpful the way that you broke it down. And I want to echo Councilwoman Gross's comment about how happy I am to see the work and the shift towards a refocusing of the URA's mission, and I look forward to seeing that continue. First question I have is, can you comment on why the state funding is so low relative to the city and the federal?
So the state funding is pretty much DCED, which is just admin funds. That's not the capital end, and I think we're seeing a reduction in some of that. We don't get a significant amount of funding for that. You want to speak to some of it?
It's
Yeah.
decreased
So
over the past 4 or 5 years. It's decreased, and so we certainly try to look to those remaining dollars to fill our operating ask. We do get some capital deployment from the state, such as RCAP, so that's some of what you see in that $150 million. But from an operating standpoint, the dollars are just, this is a very difficult task to look at budgets and figure out how do we keep bodies and seats to deliver on the work. So we've gotten very creative this year about how to do that. But would certainly need capital expenditure and support in order for you to feel that work.
Mm-hmm. Most of the state funding goes directly to the programs. We don't get any administrative fees from them. Even RCAP, we're collecting that from the actual developers or the sub-grantees. We're not getting it from RCAP money.
Okay, that's helpful to know what the dynamic is there. It just looked very, very low relative to the other sources. It strikes me that there are a number of programs, including the Micro Enterprise Loan Program, Land Care, that are doing more to help to grow the types of MWBE businesses to make them then competitive for bidding on URA, city, other programs or bids. Than the city is currently able to do, or that it just seems like it's a really effective program on a smaller, admittedly on a smaller scale. Mm-hmm. I just would like your general assessment as to how scalable you think those are.
So I'm going to ask Jennifer to come up. She works on this day in and day out, and so I certainly don't want to misrepresent anything with respect to the Micro Enterprise Fund program. So one of the reasons why we developed the program is because the URA was doing gap financing. And so what we found was that there was a need for small business to have a primary lender who's willing to take a bet on a small business. And so we did some analysis and sort of modeled our program after Detroit's program and Johnstown's program to get to the Micro Enterprise Fund. And so I think the ability to scale it, we put in 250 at the onset to see how that performed. It performed very well. And so we've tried to take some of the interest off of some of our other higher performing loan programs to feed into this, but that's not sustainable because the repayment from microloan in itself is not going to sustain the program. So we look to the city to give us an infusion of cash to be able to continue to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk a little bit about sustainability.
The program's been running a little over a year and a half now, and we've seen it continue to increase. We certainly have some sustainability in the fact that we have gotten our processes quite tight, and we have a lot of staff, though, that are underwriting this. So the deployment of the project is very time intensive because we are working with often first-time entrepreneurs who are at the very beginnings of understanding how to run a business. So what we're doing is we're providing an opportunity here. So just to give you a sense, this year, we have already funded, just through this program alone, we funded 31, which is over $700,000 deployed specifically to these businesses. And 87% of these businesses are run by women or minorities, and honestly, the vast majority is African American women that we are funding. And those individuals are, as you've mentioned, they're creating wealth for their families. And that's one of the things that we get very excited about. But the deployment of these programs and the assistance to these entrepreneurs, it is staff intensive, it certainly is. But I believe that with the right support, we could be definitely going further, doubling these initiatives. We could be providing additional technical support. Right now, what we're doing is we provide the loan financing, but we also have a pot of money where we have contracted with technical assistance providers to provide one-on-one support. So we're actually meeting these entrepreneurs on both sides. One of the things that we're doing is we are pairing them up at our cost with technical assistance providers to help them get their materials together if they don't have that experience. So we are reducing every barrier we can think of. Our interest rate is 2%. So we are not making money on this program by any means.
And it's credit agnostic as well. So it's one of the programs that is not looking at credit. We're looking at the strength of the business and whether or not it can grow. And this loan review committee for the microloan program is one of the most diverse committees the URA has employed to look at these matters and give these entrepreneurs a fair shot. So
we have representatives from all the council districts on this committee, as well as multiple different ethnicity and backgrounds. But I'll just say one more thing. So to bookend this program.
Yes.
We have a
list of the loan review committee folks.
The bookend of this program is that not only do we do the technical assistance on the front end, but once they get the loan, we continue to help them. So I just want to mention that because that's really critical. And we've had some businesses come back. They've been able to come back for a second one because they're still not in a place where they can go to the commercial market and get a bank loan because maybe their credit's just not there yet. So we're trying to keep helping them to grow that business to get there.
And we hope to be able to append credit reporting to this. That's another thing that additional funding would allow us to do, is to help these entrepreneurs transition into the primary financing market with this sort of being their first entree into accessing capital. Thank you.
Thank you. That I think that illustrates just how resource intensive, human resource intensive these kinds of programs really are to make them successful and not just checking a box. So I guess my question is, to scale it up, would it take double the staff, double the resources to double the program is because of that? Or once the infrastructure is in place, can you double, triple it with just a little bit of an increase?
So there will be some efficiencies that are built in as you continue to refine, as Jennifer said, refine the process and how we deploy the tools. But the reality is that we are understaffed in our lending division. What we are being tasked to do, we are doing it in a manner that is unsustainable. So our $3 million ask for operating support was to allow us to retain the the loan officers that we have, and also bring on new folks to handle the pipeline. Because the thing that sort of breaks my heart is when somebody comes to the URA for support and we have to turn them away simply because we don't have the capacity to address the need at the scale that it exists. So, our CFO has done a fantastic job since December helping us understand how we could address that need and address that concern. I'll be very honest with you, not getting that support from the city for more than just $540,000 in project delivery could compromise these programs. It places them at risk. We start them as pilots because we've heard you and we take very seriously what you ask us to do at this table. The reality is that they're not revenue generating, they're not self-sustaining yet, so we need more support until we figure out 2 to 3 years from now how to make them more sustainable. So thank you for asking that question. It's a very, very important question.
Thank you. And then just my one last question, which feel free to respond to or not, depending on what your thoughts are. But I just see an opportunity with some of the facade renovation programs, whether they're residential or commercial, to marry them with energy efficiency retrofits to help the city attain its climate action goals around energy efficiency and energy use and energy reduction. So to the extent that there might be additional funding elsewhere outside of the city government for those types of programs, or if you see any kind of opportunity over and above what you're already doing, I just wanted to mention that as a possibility.
Thank you. We've had some internal discussions around sustainability and climate action. The board has asked me to look at it in 2020, so I'm going to take a note, or should I say David's going to take better notes than I do, to look at that. Thank you for the recommendation. We will certainly give it some thought.
And to the extent that I can be helpful in that conversation or making those introductions or even just brainstorming, happy to have that conversation offline.
That'd be great. We'll
Thank
reach
you
out.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Harris.
Yes.
We have less than an hour to see that.
I have all day.
No.
Okay.
I still have to go too.
Right. Talking about the entrepreneurs and the programs that you're working with, for how many years is this now?
18 months.
It's 18 months, okay. But you worked with small businesses before that, correct?
For gap financing.
Right.
This is the first program that sort of puts URA money in first instead of filling a gap.
Okay. Out of these programs, I don't know, I've seen more failures than I've seen actually businesses that stay whole, when maybe it's where I'm at.
Microenterprise program actually has a very high pay rate. I mean, the default rate is very minimal. I think
It's
at this
less than
point-
Detroit.
Yeah, it's like 98% pay for those loans. So CIE, that's
But
why
that's
they do a
18
lot of
months, right? So
within
far.
18 months.
That's 18 months, the pilot. And so what Jennifer was mentioning is that we do a lot of technical assistance on the front end to prepare them for the ask, and then we do technical support on the back end to help them be successful in their repayment. So
Are
it is a
these some of the
wraparound.
same ones that had failure, or no?
No, we have very few failure. Everybody's in a current payment.
No,
current paying
we've
status.
had some that.
Oh, you mean legacy programs?
Right.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So what's interesting is that when we launched the idea for the microloan program, some of the pushback from leadership at the time was, well, we've done that before and it failed and it didn't work. And so what I asked for was some of the lessons learned. What did we learn about
Right.
those failures, and how can we construct this program in a manner that avoids that and helps entrepreneurs to be successful? So Jennifer and Tom have done a fantastic job at their own expense, some very late nights of working with these entrepreneurs to help them be successful. So the old model, Pittsburgh is very different than it was back in the 80s and 90s when folks were having these challenges. A lot of these African-American women who are going into entrepreneurship, they have business plans, they've thought this through, they're committed to it. So we've seen a lot of success because the entrepreneur now, I think, is very different than it was before. We don't just do this program in isolation. We're partnering with the small business development centers, with Chatham's Women's Business Center, to really ensure that it's not just the URA in there alone, that we have other supports in our ecosystem partnering with us as well. And I think that that's contributed to the success of the program.
Okay. Now I've had a bone to pick, I guess, with not really caring about some historic buildings in my district where the URA is just wiped out. Matter of fact, 3 of them, while developers were going in and looking at them. Is this going to continue like that? Just because maybe people have lived in the neighborhood 3 years and say, well, even though the rest of the community as a whole have cherished that area, that you just have a few people coming in and saying, oh, well, tear them down, as developers are going through them.
So what I would say is that the URA certainly has a commitment to preservation going into
They
2020.
haven't.
They have historically they haven't. I'm acknowledging that
Right.
there have been some
Up
issues
to
around.
this year, they haven't.
And so, and you may be, there's a specific project I think that you may be talking about here. And
Right.
so one of the things that our new organizational strategy and organizational vision talks about is how we can do deeper listening in communities and to really, sort of be more responsive to communities and what their wants and desires and needs are, and that's challenging, and that comes at a cost. Being able to preserve an asset is costly, which is again another reason why we're asking for these dollars to help us to be in a position to not have to respond to the market, but to be able to respond to community, and we certainly need city support in order to be able to do that. I have a personal commitment to preservation coming from the Hill District. I want to, those buildings mean something to the people who live there and continue to live there. And so sometimes, it may not always pencil out on the balance sheet to do preservation, but it's not something that we should enter into lightly, and that when a structure goes down, it's also taking with it a long history and a sense of nostalgia and meaning for people who live in that neighborhood. So I can't make any guarantees at this table right now as to what will happen, but I can tell you that the thinking and the goal of the organization is to preserve first when possible. That's why we showed that house that was scheduled to be demolished, and the team worked very hard to turn that into an affordable opportunity. We were able to give it to the CDC for $1 because we had support from the city to be able to cover the cost that otherwise would have turned into demolishing an asset that would have caused a missing tooth in a neighborhood.
Okay. But just 10 or 15 people at a community meeting are not the whole community.
Understood.
And the community that has lived there for a very lengthy time. A matter of fact, quite a few. There's one street in particular that all of the north side cares about, and that's where 3 buildings were destroyed because a few people were in a meeting. And as developers were going in, and there were 2 other developers scheduled to go in there, the next day, I think it was, that they came and took the buildings down. And my understanding was that it was the URA that did it. So that really bothered me. And if you're really going to talk about preserving and entrepreneurship and not just looking at outsiders coming in, but the people that are really here from Pittsburgh, I think the URA got a way to go, and maybe you need more people in that department.
I'd
that
love more people
care.
in that department. I love a preservation
and not
team.
ones that just have lived here in the city for 3 or 4 years.
That's very important. Yeah.
It just doesn't. It just won't work out that way. Could have lost the whole Hill District. I asked the community before I voted on tearing down the arena. The arena actually took out a lot of their homes, people's homes that lived there, and it was very sad. And now you're starting to take hold of more of the buildings. Are you saying that, say, could be condemned or condemned buildings?
So if you look at the Center Avenue RFQ process that we're doing, a lot of those buildings are tagged right now for demolition. So the URA has intervened with small businesses to try to preserve them and bring them back to reknit the neighborhood. I think
So
that
it's only for businesses?
Businesses, any interested party, businesses, nonprofits, residents who might be interested in preserving one of those assets. I mean, they are condemned right now. They should be demolished if you look at a certain faction. I'm not saying that, but our board intervened and said there's an opportunity to do some aggressive preservation, and that's what we're doing. So it's a slow, methodical process. It requires deep community engagement. We've been on a listening tour with hundreds of people in a room that are from that neighborhood, telling us what they want to see and what their expectations are, and then we roll that data so that when we go to our board with a recommendation, the recommendation has been to preserve Ham's Barbershop and put a small business in it, not demolish it.
Right.
Even though that's what certain developers or certain folks might want,
Exactly.
we've been in a
And
position to
that's
be more
exactly
thoughtful.
what happened this year. You know, because you have people from the outside wanting to come in and do things differently, where there are people that want to keep alive some of the history
Yes.
of the community. And that goes for all the way around the city, not just in one neighborhood or another neighborhood. Are we looking into helping out when a community is trying to get their housing back together? Okay. And looking also, you're also looking at all the condemned properties.
Yes, so
Okay.
our real estate team, in the presentation, we talked a little bit
Right.
about the
I
preservation.
was listening
the
just
a-
'cause
the
I wasn't in the
that's
room.
fine. The asset management play, again, it requires considerable resources. We are going through the couch cushions at the URA to make sure that we are able to do that more effectively again and be responsive. And so, you know, that the challenge is a resource challenge, but it's also a creativity challenge. If we want to do something in Pittsburgh, we get it done. We just have to put our minds to it and really focus on it. So in 2020, I hope in my new capacity to be able to shepherd and spearhead some of that stuff. And I know Nathan Clark, our director of real estate, he and I have had many conversations around how to rethink this and how to do a better job of it. And we're committed to doing that.
Okay. I hope so, because if you watch the news today, I think it was a 3-alarm fire, and it was huge. They called it Spring Hill, but it was basically in City View.
Okay.
Don't even know which neighborhoods are which, but they were condemned properties that somebody could have made a nice low-income home out of it. And it's really sad what is happening around the city like that. And I'm hoping that there is a change where that takes place, and it's looking at the whole city, not just part of the city. And I guess you don't have nothing to do with your board, right?
The URA's board?
Yeah.
The board is an independent governing body. They
Right.
certainly have the power of recommendation, but they are the boss.
Yeah. They used to have the building trades. They used to have somebody from the building trades on it. And now they just got Sam Williamson, who does not understand the building. And it's sad that they put a trade in like that. And I just wanted to say that publicly because it is. And I'm just hoping that it's not a downfall of the URA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman who's filling in for me, I'm sorry, I'm in and out of the office.
You know, I know you have some stuff you're working on. I just want to thank you all. First, I want to thank you, Diamante, for taking us through this transition. As you know, I was a big supporter. I wanted Diamante to be the director. I thought that it would be great to have somebody from Pittsburgh, not having to teach somebody about Pittsburgh, but it'd be great to have somebody who knows about Pittsburgh, knows about the areas, and really understands what it's like to work with the communities at the helm. And so I just want to thank you very much. I'm very pleased with Sam Williamson. I mean, I get along very well with him, so I'm glad to see that he's the president, the chair of the board. But I will say I do have concerns with the board because there's no one from southwest of the Pittsburgh on that. And I did talk to the mayor's office about that, and I think that will be a priority for the next board member. And if not, I'm going to make sure that I draw a lot of attention to it, because it's great that all this stuff is happening all across the city. And for the first time in decades, I actually see investment in southwest of the river. And we have not seen this in forever. I mean, a very long time. It's still not nearly comparable to what's happening in the East End, but I think it's also reflective of the board. But I want to say, I mean, a lot of people have questions and concerns about the URA. It's one of my favorite departments to work with because I think you really do want to work in our area. I think you want to help us out. I think there's an absence of a CDC in our area. And so all of your staff they've all been tremendous working with us.
They're amazing. Yeah.
They really are. I mean, they've really done a lot of great things. And both the previous board, or members that have worked with us, and the current ones. But I do want to say that that's a concern to me, is that there's no one from southwest of the river. And when we talk about government street income, I want to make sure you keep some of that, because I think that is always the voice of the people. Yes. And without the us in council having, so I'll be happy to work with Councilman Lavelle on some of the amendments, but I want a commitment too that some of these programs will be extended into, because I did see the map where some of the facade money was not so prevalent in the southwest of the river. But I mean, even though there was some, it just wasn't real prevalent. So I'd like to work with him on that, because those programs do help a lot of people, and they have been very beneficial in our area. But one of the things I do want to ask you about is the 7,000 properties that the URA has currently. As you know, we called for a post agenda. I apologize that I wasn't here for it, but we had at the time I had jury duty, which I didn't get selected, but I had to wait through all day to find out that I did get selected. But when you're talking about money and needing money for maintenance, I'm wondering why and how quickly you're trying to dispose of those properties to get those properties into some good home ownership. Because in our area, we'd like to see preservation of the homes, and because there's so much in our area, so we'd like to see those homes refurbished and get. And I want to say. Richard Snipe's not here right now, but Richard Snipe is working in Sheridan, Elliott, part of Crafton Heights, which I think he thought was another area, and part of Beachview in my district. And he has a core group of residents in those areas that he's working with. And I just want to thank him, because I feel like he's going to get some things done there. So I want to thank him for that. But could you talk about the 7,000 properties that the URA is holding, and how if you could get those properties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to clarify, our actual inventory is closer to 1,500 properties. That 7,000 number are city-owned properties that internally the city has tagged hold for URA. And that tag can mean a lot of things. Most often what it means is a community group has expressed to the URA that they're interested in that parcel. So before city real estate staff goes to sell it, they check in with the URA. We then check in with the community group and say, is it okay to release the hold from this parcel, or do you still have plans for it?
So can I say we have a meeting scheduled to talk about how we can move these parcels a little bit more quickly? So it should be you that attends the meeting.
It's a lot of folks, the city and the URA should both be there.
We have those other folks. I just want to make sure who from the URA.
Yes.
I sort of check with you to see who we should have.
I'm the correct person, yes.
Yeah. We'll make sure we have appropriate staffing.
Okay, because we want to make sure that we're figuring out this process and how we're going to really move these properties along. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of the idea of letting community groups, CDCs, and others have such a say, because in our area, the URA is holding 6 Boggs Avenue for us, which we would like to see go through a public process. And at the time, the MWCDC was purchasing the property for, I think it was $4,000 from our real estate department. I deleted that property when residents told me that the property was going to be sold to a board member for development, because I'm not going to be a part of that not, if I have a say, I'm going to delete it. And so we deleted that property, and I turned it over to the URA and said, please make sure that there's a clear public process and that people can all bid on that property, because as it started going through a bidding war, it went up to 40,000, I think was the last bid. And so it was going for under 4,000. So I want to say that was a concern for me. So when people talk about council not having say, we are able to stop those kinds of things from happening if we know about it. And thank God the residents, made me aware of the issue, because I didn't know that this whole plan. And the reason we shut down the CDC in the West End was because there was properties being sold, to board members and all sorts of things happening like this. So I really watch and pay attention to this because of those issues. So I want to thank you for your work on this, but I want to make sure that I advocate for council having a say in what happens to the properties in our district, including with the real estate department. I mean, right now we have that say between, with them. I want to know how we can all work together to make sure that we're doing what's right by these properties and by the public. I'm not here to play games with, for anyone. And I'm certainly not going to put my name on the line for somebody, selling properties.
Understood.
And
So we are doing our 2020 work plan, and so this is looking at our land portfolio between the city and the URA comprehensively is a strategic part of that work plan. So we hope to be able to have that done by the first quarter. I know that Nathan and his team are working on it. It is, if we're going to talk about affordability and home ownership, we've got to look at the stuff that we already own and if it's within government control. We have the ability to do what private developers aren't going to do, and we should be intently focused on that. So there will be a work plan that's developed once the new ED comes on to look at that and figure out a comprehensive strategy. So it's not just this one-off, in that we can be responsive in the neighborhood. If your neighborhood doesn't have a CDC and we need Rich Knight there working on behalf of the PHDC to fill that gap and ensure that you have the level of say and control that you want, then that's what we do. We may move differently in another neighborhood where there are different preferences, but I think we can be nimble enough. But again, that's having the staff and the support that's needed in order to do that. If we have to do a massive reduction in force, all of the promises that we talked about here at this table, they become less feasible to do. So that's why this, I thank you again for your time and willingness to listen and ask probative questions. It's very, very important that we get this right and that we work cooperatively.
Thank you. And I just want to talk about, when you talk about preservation, the one thing I'm going to advocate for is the Old Stone Tavern, second oldest building in the city of Pittsburgh, and yet we still have no plans 10 years later. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the community group itself, that was working on it. But I think right now it's got a lot of attention, and I think that...
Is it a URA asset?
It's not, and I think that there's going to be some way. The problem is the developer wants to sell the property. I think part of the problem was the community group working on it kept talking about it so publicly that the price kept increasing because the developer realized, or the property owner realized the value of the property. So the more they talked about it, the more PR it got, the higher the price kept going. And it's now, I think, like $700,000. And so that is the biggest obstacle and hurdle. But I think we have Parkway Center Mall. I'd like to see some work happening. I'd like to see some things happening there. So when we're talking about, being inclusive, that's also geographically inclusive.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I want to make sure that southwest of the river is getting some attention. Parkway Center Mall, Noblestown Road, Banksville, all those areas that need some attention, and definitely, of course, Sheridan, the Chartiers Avenue corridor, which we did have Claire and Healy was working on, and I don't know what the status of that is now because you made so many changes there that I feel like that's kind of fallen through the cracks. So I'd like to make sure that somebody's working on that, and I really, I know that there's different personalities at the URA and different things happening, but I will say that she was always somebody I could call and make sure that there was an issue that we wanted to have it addressed. She did address it. And so I want to make sure that...
Claren is still there.
Yeah, but I want to make sure that somebody's working on that corridor. And I don't care what your internal relationships are. I care about getting results for my district. And to me, she was getting results. We may not always agreed about some of the things, but I knew she cared, and that she'd be working on something.
She leave?
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's it for me. I just want to thank you all for your work. It's one of my favorite departments to work with, and and I do see some results because of it. And I do want to say, it's difficult to see results in our district because we have 17 neighborhoods. So I just want to point this out real quickly. But since we've been in office, we've had a stadium built, we've had Amazon move to Fairywood, ModCloth moved to the area, Saloni Bakery built a new place. So that there is a lot. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but there's development all over. But it is so spread out. It's difficult to see. Like, you don't see it as you do in maybe the East End, where there's just a few neighborhoods that are clustered together. So I do want to thank you for the work that you've helped us with, including repurposing all of our closed school buildings. And I really want to see that you, I asked my office to schedule a meeting with you and the Porters, because they're working on the Sheridan buildings at Holy Innocents, Joey Porter and his wife.
Thank you. I look forward to that.
Thank you for everything you do.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you, council members. We are going to recess this meeting. 1:30, the mayor's office will be here, the controller's office, the Commission on Human Relations, and the Department of City Planning. So we are going to reconvene, recess this meeting. Recess this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.